thank you everyone for attending today. I'm really excited to talk about the topic of accessibility. It's one of my personal passions. We'll get started with a quick overview of the mission today. My hope today is just to broaden your definition of accessibility and really get you excited about it. And if it's something that is really important to you, I want to be able to help you identify ways to get support for it in your organization. So I'm going to start at the basic level. What is it? And I've asked people, for their own opinion about what they feel like accessibility is for them personally. And I get a lot of different answers. Sometimes it's about, I don't know what accessibility is, but I know it needs to be something that's on our executive team's radar, or it's something that I need to incorporate in my product. Other people have a more personal feeling about it, and maybe they come from the point of maybe they're disabled, maybe they're in a situation of disability that's temporary, and maybe they themselves have felt some of the barriers of not being able to access products. And so I love that there is that range, and hopefully I give you a little bit of information today that helps you kind of formulate your own more broad perspective about accessibility. This is my personal one. I just strive to help everyone be able to get the full value of a product or service, regardless of their circumstance or ability. And if you know the Simon Sinek, concentric circle chart, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I think that accessibility, it becomes something that's very important to customers. And it becomes important to do business with companies who also share sort of your value system. And so whatever your motivation, my personal motivation is to try and reach as many people as possible. And I do recognize that accessibility is a spectrum, and that each organization has to find the right balance, to really guide their brand. So I would like to help you think of inclusivity and accessibility as similar topics, and think of it as like a set of concentric circles. But on the right-hand side, you see a lot of things that are maybe circumstantial. They might be temporary situations, but in a building that has stairs, for example, that allow people to move between floors. In any of these circumstances on the right-hand side, you could be someone who's fit and trying to increase your step count. Hey, stairs work great. Maybe for children under 10, maybe not all children under 10, but for a lot of them, they're spry and they like the stairs and it works. But for anyone that's in any of these other circumstances, whether it's I'm on crutches temporarily or permanently, I'm in a hurry, maybe I have a roller bag, maybe I'm just carrying a lot of groceries or something like that. Anyway, you see the full list here. There's a lot of circumstantial reasons why a solution, physically or otherwise, might be a barrier. And in the case of stairs, maybe it's not the best solution. So I've had people ask me sometimes in a building, well, why are there buildings that have escalators right next to an elevator, right next to stairs? And the very reason is to support all of these edge cases. And this has been happening for a long time in physical construction. And really, they were born to fix these issues, right? Stairs just frankly didn't work for everyone. And so I challenge you to think about accessibility in terms of its definition more broadly, but accessibility definitely applies to digital environments and spaces as well. So this is the definition that I tend to rely on myself, which is web accessibility refers to the inclusive practice of removing barriers for people with disabilities that might prevent their interaction or access to it, including websites or mobile applications. And I'll go into a little bit of the origin because I think that's important, and I focused this first piece a little bit on the United States. So the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, is kind of the foundation, and that really started to address buildings, physical design. And it's very clear, the laws themselves about buildings having to match a certain code to enable access for everyone. But it also it includes a public accommodation, and this is where it really starts to extend, to digital products or digital spaces as well. So in terms of the law, and I have to say, I am not an attorney, so I am not giving any legal advice today. But I do have experience helping customers who have gone through, litigation. And so I'm drawing on those experiences and sharing them with you today. Really, it's kind of viewed as a civil rights issue. Equality under the law, equal access, right to access and information. And then, of course, there are specific laws around your security and privacy. And with everything moving to digital services and things that you used to do either by phone or in person, all of those things are now moving to digital. And as they do, it's important to make sure that we don't leave people behind, or that we don't create barriers for those individuals to be able to leverage those services and products that are in digital spaces. I often get asked, so is compliance optional? And unequivocally, I would tell you no. There is a lack of regulation, and sometimes that equates to poor compliance. I know the A11Y project did a recent scan, and I think Wave also did a scan of like the top million sites or top 1,000 sites or what have you. And they did come back and say that among those, compliance was low. And that was sort of disappointing, right? But those numbers are turning around, and businesses are making improvements. There are some organizations that fight it. Most recently, I think about Domino's Pizza. They actively challenged the accessibility laws in the highest U.S. courts. The Supreme Court denied the petition to hear it, which really caused the lower court decision, to remain intact. And we do see this pretty progressively, that the courts are consistently upholding all of the court cases that have been in support of access and accessibility. And there are many related regulations that I thought were worth pointing out here. Section 501 and 503 have to do with federal employment. So think about, your ability to apply for a job, and how most people are, in many whole industries, are almost exclusively trying to put all of their employment, recruiting, etc., in digital spaces. And so things like Section 501 and 503 are additional governing considerations, for federal employment. If a project is federally funded or an organization is federally funded, Section 504 would be applicable. Section 508 actually is a big thing if you're a manufacturer, or if you do business with the government. This is a subset of the WCAG requirements, 508, but those would apply to government contracts. So if you're doing business with government, 508 is very important. If your business is related to healthcare IT, then Section 1557 is important, and on and on. And you can see over here on the right side, some of the 11th District or Circuit Court, have made a statement. Individual district judges have made statements upholding it, and the Department of Justice continues to apply ADA to private websites and any digital experience that meets the definition of a public accommodation. So I also see that the policies are extending across the globe. I've had clients that are in other countries, and Canada, the UK, and New Zealand. The accessibility laws certainly are not specific to the United States. There are many laws that vary across borders, but they all have kind of unified against the standard of the WCAG, the WCAG 2.0 standard. And so that's what I normally advise clients, that if we want to make this a priority, that's really the standard that we would be shooting for. And again, it does apply here in the U.S., but it's definitely been extending across the globe. The other thing I would say is that everyone, I think sometimes accessibility is thought of as a problem for individuals who are permanently disabled. And businesses often take a lens of, well, this is a small segment. And while that statistic is also probably not true, 1 in 5 reports some type of, needing some type of assistive technology to access websites. So it's a daunting number of people. So when you think about it from a human perspective, it's really something that I personally want to get behind. And there are so many types of reasons why you would need assistive technology, and it's not always for a permanent disability. It might be that you have a broken arm, or that you may have a mobility issue, temporarily. Maybe you had a surgery, etc. So there's a lot of individuals that find themselves requiring some kind of assistive technology, even if their disability isn't permanent. It's a very large segment. So I mentioned assistive technologies, and these are products or equipment, peripherals, things like that. It could be a visual mouse, it could be special software like screen readers, could be even modified keyboards to help individuals, really move around the website, navigate the website the way that others would. And these products are amazing, and if you see the following and the passion that these groups really have for these products, they build a forever brand follow, from people just being so excited that this brand is supporting their needs. And we're all unique. I remember seeing this, everywhere. You probably do too, the famous dress that people either saw gold and white, or I think it was black and purple. But 10% of the male population is colorblind, and colorblindness is something that critically affects digital products and services. And there are many forms of colorblindness. You can see 9 of them represented here in this contrast accessibility tool that I'm simulating. But the nature of that means that what color you decide to use on your website and what color combinations you use for the foreground and the background all have a bearing on whether or not you would comply. And also, it also moves toward readability and things like that. So you'll see as you use smaller and smaller fonts, the contrast actually has to be higher. And that makes sense, right? I mean, when you do the eye test, the one on the bottom is incredibly difficult to read. And if they had modified that chart from being something that was black and white, which has the highest contrast ratio, right, people would score even more poorly on the test. So while we have unique needs and we see the world very uniquely, our human needs are sort of universal. So this is a concentric circle model. Universal design is maybe the broadest way to talk about it. There's definitely a factor of usability, which I'm a strong advocate for. And then there's, accessible design, and then there's, exclusive design. Exclusive design meaning, for a specific audience only. And a gentleman named Ron Mace actually coined the phrase universal design. He had polio, and he spent most of his life, advocating for people like him in this context. And so I really love his definition of universal design, and it's a way of talking about it at different levels in your organization. There is no normal, there is no single persona, we're all different. And so just embracing everyone's diversity and looking to make the circle bigger and bigger and include more and more people is something that it's a positive marketing message. And it goes a long way toward having an accessibility statement on your website or in a public forum to just say, this is what we're doing, even if you aren't fully compliant. Just expressing the small things that users can do to enjoy your website more. So whether it's we offer closed captioning of video content, if it's that we make a tool available, or just specifying the browsers that they may find more or less support for their needs. There are all kinds of things you can do inside of that statement to help customers understand how they can maximize your products and services in your digital space as they experience it. And what we've seen is that, a lot of really great products that we use today have come from accessibility. And I've listed out some of them here, but, snowboards really came from a position of, if people were not able to be on skis, snowboards became a great alternative, and now they're an Olympic sport in and of themselves. And there's a ton listed here, but the point to say is that we all benefit from the innovation for inclusivity. Inclusive design, like I said, it just makes the circle bigger and your potential customer base higher. This is a simple example. You encounter a straw probably each and every day, but it started out as one thing, and then there was a problem for somebody using the straw the way it was originally designed, and there was a need to let it be bendable. Then the need was to make it more bendable. We've gone to metal straws and all kinds of reusable straws now for those who are really looking to be more green. And all of these things improve things for everybody, and not even just humans, but all life in general. So accessibility is good for people. It's also good for business. There are some serious upsides for compliance. There's a serious discretionary spending power of people in the disability segment. It's estimated at $220 billion. That's a big number. Obviously, there are higher revenues that are associated and greater profit margin from companies who are, prioritizing accessibility. It can have a really positive effect on brand. I mentioned that before. Marketing teams can pick up and start talking about the stories and messaging about what you're doing to support new groups and to provide new features and capability. We see better acquisition and better retention with customers and employees. It makes you feel good if you're working on a product and you're making it accessible for more people and a better experience for customers. And satisfaction obviously is baked into that. We see that customers who adopt accessibility and make it a priority and build a culture around it see higher satisfaction scores overall. You will also see, better earned traffic, and a lot of this has to do with SEO. So, closed captioning your videos, making sure that you fully qualify your alt text on your images, making sure that you have all of that metadata. It does count for something, and you will find that your products actually are easier for customers to find, and that you'll see potentially increases in earned traffic. Obviously, if you're not working with government contract, then maybe this is a current step that you're looking to take so that you can open up those opportunities. Obviously, getting to work, with the government is oftentimes a very strategic move for businesses, and people spend their dollars. I was saying this earlier, where with brands that align with their personal, ethics. And if you're an organization that's, trying to help, they're going to reward you with their purchases and their support, and possibly even brand advocacy. I also have looked at reading and comprehension scores. So there are several reading tools that are out there that help you understand sentiment of messaging and whether content has a generally positive or negative skew, but it also can tell you what level of education you would require. And language is something that's very important, because you may be a site that is trying to reach an audience that might be using English for the first time, or you might be reintroducing an existing service but to a new market. And making sure that your language is accessible is also key, like avoiding things like contractions and things that don't translate well across different languages. And we also see the higher use of transcripts, and this is actually something that we even see from sighted users and people with perfect hearing. They still would like to use transcripts because maybe they're in a business environment and they can't turn on the audio or something. So transcripts benefit all types of folks. The downsides of not complying are reasonable too. I I hesitate sometimes, there is a constituency that really focuses on fear, but I will just discuss the downsides today, but I try to keep it really positive and really stay on the side of all the reasons to really be behind accessibility, for all of the reasons that we've discussed, but there are some risks. So there is a risk of litigation, and lawsuits. I've certainly seen that with customers. You could have a loss of customers, that segment that we talked about. If you're not providing them a service and your competitor is, then you may see the loss of that customer or loss of market share in general. We definitely see that if customers feel like, particularly in a design field where they know and education is higher for accessibility, if they hear that executives and others are really not in support of it, it can make it not as fun of a product to work on. So definitely, think about these, and of course the lower CSAT scores. The number of cases are definitely on the rise. I remember in early years, like 2015, I think that there was only like 50 to 60 cases in the U.S. But by 2018, it was well over 2,000, and numbers have been, growing by triple-digit, percentage. It's just crazy how many more suits are being filed. And I show you this list only because some of these all of these cases are on the Department of Justice website, and you can look them up. I think there's a wealth of information if you are trying to understand this side of it, the legal side of it. The Department of Justice is very transparent about that information. And you can see that it's everything from a Target or a Netflix, but it's also like Seattle Public Schools. So the Department of Justice is not just going after retail or just finance or something like that. They're really kind of addressing it wholeheartedly across industry. And this is an example of like Peapod and the actual website. I just wanted to kind of point a starter for you so that you could go out there and take a look for yourself, and educate yourself on what was required for remediation and what was the judgment like, because I do think there's a lot to be learned from the information that the Department of Justice makes available. I will also say that, again, it's across industry. It's higher education, it's banking. Harvard and MIT have been, they're in the higher education group. There are a ton of government organizations that have been taken. Target, Lucky Brand. I mean, the number of retailers, containers. There's quite a few. So every industry is definitely something that the DOJ is looking at. And independent lawyers are active as well. The Dinosaur Barbecue is a small mom and pop website. I believe they're only one location. And so the point to say here is that it doesn't matter if you're a small business or a large, or the largest of businesses. Lawyers are active across the group. So I want to make it clear that there is no exception for it being a small or a private business. But corporate leaders and even business owners can be change agents inside of their organizations. And this is two quotes from fairly large organizations, but I think they really represent what the top level executives in organizations should aspire, and that's to really make it a core value. Apple, of course, said it's a basic human right. They went beyond the civil right, and they say it's a human right. And many other countries have sort of embraced that same feeling. So I'll tell you a personal story here. I was working at a company, and I hadn't been there terribly long, but they got sued. And it was pretty scary. You get this email from your corporate legal team, and they basically tell you, all of your communications are now theirs, and that you have to be CCing them on every communication. And it really sent our team, into a kind of a tailspin. And the product budget for that year was, it was a good budget, but a lot of that budget was spent trying to just document where we are and to help support the internal legal team with facts and information. So I say this because a lot of organizations are trying to decide now, and yours might be one of them that's trying to decide, should I fight this? And the number of cases that have been successfully defended are really small. So a lot of the expense and the cash outlay for defending themselves is really in the end not worth it, because it's the opportunity cost of spending those same dollars making the product accessible. So while I can't give you legal advice, just on a personal level and what I've observed, and just looking at the statistics of the number of successful defenses, it is really smart, at least from the numbers, to maybe put your dollars behind making your product more accessible. I also wanted to give an example. I'm not trying to pick on anyone, but I had to pick one company, and I found this one website. I did do an audit for them, and so if they're listening, this is a free audit. But these are some of the main issues that were wrong. And on your site, you can check this easily. In Chrome, Lighthouse has an Axe, which is a DQ API. They have partnered together, and when you go into Chrome and you click on an audit, you can actually see directly on your page what's wrong. And if you follow the helper text around the tool, it will help you understand more about what happened and more about what you can do to directly fix it. And there are some capabilities where it will highlight the area in the code too. So from a development perspective, auditing your site at this point can be done really easily, simply in your Chrome browser. It doesn't require a lot of expense around tools. There are certainly things that make it go faster and can summarize things, but honestly, it's a very good tool, and your development teams can work directly in the tool to help mitigate the issues. This is an example of their site, and there are some contrast issues. You can see green on red text. The green, yellow, red combination is really hard for an individual with color blindness to see. The tab orders were difficult, so a screen reader is really reliant on the tab order. So if it's out of order, it would make more sense if you started at the top left, explain what website you're on, explain then that you have the options for menus like buttons like location, offers, specials, contacts, etc. And screen readers, if you haven't actually used them, they read out all of the information on the website. And if your site isn't structured to make it easy for someone who's using those assistive technologies, then they literally come to the site, and all it might say, for instance, is like, it might say button, 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 button. And that's not very helpful at all to someone who can't see the site. So I share that only as a tangible example of the types of things that you might find if you do your own audit. And I wanted to just give a visual representation of how a site might be really challenging for someone who's using some of those assistive devices. So back to my example, so the company that I was working for ended up settling out of court, and it was a big figure. And it would have probably been more a better use of company funds to have funneled those dollars into the product itself. So that's my personal experience. I can't say that's the way it is in every case, but for me personally, I saw that firsthand, that the ROI was low on the defense side. So inclusive design is trending, and new products are emerging every day, which I love. They're filling the need for individuals. This is just kind of a couple to inspire you. There is a designer who, she's amazing. She is deaf, and she wanted to have an amazing hearing aid, and she ended up incorporating it into personal jewelry for her personal design aesthetic, and there's a real following. She's very successful. There's also Be My Eyes. I'm a volunteer with this app. Basically, you lend somebody your eyes, and they use the camera on the app to point at the thing that they need help with. And this is great for somebody who has low vision. In the example they're giving you, like it's the milk expiration, so nobody wants to drink bad milk. And so, hey, has it expired, and when does it expire? And then the person can simply just answer the question, which helps them so much. So if you're not a volunteer on Be My Eyes, I strongly recommend it. But it's one example of like a really great product that's out there trying to help customers or help humans really just get through the day. This is also UniQ, and they offer like these really beautiful prosthetic covers, scoliosis braces, and just they're so lovely. They almost look like corsets, or I don't know, cool tech if you ask me. And they're being rewarded handsomely in sales and increased revenue. This is a braille marker, but it also is scented, so someone who can't see can either feel for the braille message, or they can actually smell it, which helps them go really fast if they are trying to draw. And then finally, a very successful product, it's a braille watch from a company, Dot, and it is a beautiful product. Honestly, I love it. I would wear this watch. It's very attractive. And the utility behind it for individuals who are not sighted is amazing. So my advice in practicality is that if you are an organization that has a publicly accessible website or application or any space that's digital, and you try your best to build a culture of inclusion. At Object Edge, we try really hard to inspire these aspects in our client organizations, and I know it's not always easy for you to do that, and so hopefully I've given you some information today. But I would say education is maybe the first thing. If you feel like you're in your organization and you don't know what to do, just honestly repeating some of the information I've shared with you today and evangelizing inside of your own organization is going to grow education. And then in general, when you're building these products, it may start with the product vision, just setting a goal at the very beginning of the project that you want to make your product accessible to more audiences. And then in the design phase, there are a ton of things that you can do in the design itself, mapping to touch points, following the guidelines, and really, even if you just start with color contrast, I would say if you're working with a design system and you have a distributed design team, then making sure that your design system is accessible ensures that any of your designers working in your distributed environment are able to sort of bake that into their work, and it makes governance frankly easier. So if you're using tools like Envision DSM or Sketch, there are so many tools out there that can work with those design tools to help you ensure that the investments you're making in design really are made consistent. And a codified design system goes even one step further, which is that now a developer can actually have a piece of code that's already been tested and that is accessible, and you can actually mark that in your design system as either made accessible and to what level. So those things can go a long way. I would say in the development process, it's a lot about making sure that your developers and your testers are using the same tools so that you come to the same conclusion in your testing and acceptance criteria. So in development, I think it's critical to make sure that all developers are doing some level of either unit testing with accessibility to make sure that their code is accessible, and really leveraging the capabilities that come with products. The iOS platform has some accessibility capabilities baked in, so it's also sometimes just a coordination point to make sure that developers have those things turned on in Xcode, or that they're working consistently with the same kind of methodology. And with testing, there's the concept of V2A, which is writing scripts to test the foreground and background contrast. Those things can be done with like an automation suite. It can also be done with the human eye, so doing manual testing. That's also something that they could pull up, with any of the tools that check contrast. You would be able to see if you are compliant or not and at what level. And then finally, post-launch, I think if you're at the point where you already have a product, that's probably the time when it's most expensive to go back and remediate. If you're trying to remediate all the issues on an entire platform that's been out there for a long time, I think that's the most challenging circumstance and probably the most expensive. So in that case, the trick is to just bake these processes in where you can, and probably starting with development and anything that's new, right? So making sure that any new changes, any new releases, that you start with those things and you make them compliant. And I listed a few of the tools and keywords that could get you started, but AxeCore is the API, the set of APIs that DQ makes available. The A11Y project. There's Wave. Wave makes several extensions, that are available so that you can scan your website. Chrome is awesome. I was mentioning that earlier, the developer tool. And Gallery, Google Gallery also integrates with Sketch, which is a popular design tool. So if you are looking to sort of test your work, Gallery can be something that's nice and integrates also with Lighthouse. So I definitely recommend that you try to build a culture around these things so that it doesn't feel like a one-time project or a one-time initiative. It's really just a way of working and a way of thinking. If you do need assistance and you feel like I still don't know quite where to start, or if you are in a circumstance where you need to get compliant very quickly, this is sort of our process and at Object Edge, and certainly we would be happy to help you remediate any of the issues that have been found on your site, or if you haven't found them and you would like us to help you find them, we would be happy to do that. The process is not arduous, and it doesn't take a year to do. These are things that we can get started on and deliver results in a really reasonable time frame. And we can work together to come up with a plan that not only supports the remediation, but supports your teams so that education stays behind long after we're gone. I would like to take this time to thank several people who have helped me learn more about accessibility. These individuals here, Lori Mahoney, Kat Holmes, inspiring me from afar. Jordan Rohaki has autism, and he's an amazing kid. He has taught me a lot about that. Chris Kersey and I have done several projects together around accessibility, and I worked with Gail McLaughlin at EDS a long time ago, and she was passionate about accessibility before accessibility was cool. And so I just want to say thank you to those individuals as well. So if you have any questions, this is my contact information. You are welcome to email me. And thank you so much for your time today. I hope that you were inspired to have your own definition of accessibility and build inclusion and a culture of inclusion in your organization. Thanks so much.